pressing the button. Yana?
Hello, my name is Ayana LupoliRojas, and today my presentation is about Ferris Bueller's Day Back, or the positive side of false nostalgia in 80s nostalgic cinema. So my argument is basically that false nostalgia is not a negative aspect of viewing nostalgic 80s cinema, reboots, sequels, and period films. It is actually a positive aspect that can improve your experience, increase happiness, and improve overall well-being of viewers, whether or not they experience the 80s or not. So, first of all, what is nostalgia? Nostalgia is basically how our brains are wired to focus on the more positive aspects of the past in order to become more optimistic about the present and future. This can often influence our memories and our reminiscence, whether or not we experience an era or whether it's just a generational memory. So we often fixate on the more positive aspects, and that is what our memories are constructed around. And as described by author historian Johann Norberg in his article False Nostalgia, nostalgia is a glass of wine, the favorite music from your teens, and the family photo album. So basically all of the positive aspects. So some more context, what is Goonies inflicted or false nostalgia? False nostalgia is, as described by author Johann Norberg, a selective artificial version of history. Look at what the good old days were really like. Basically, false nostalgia is when you see the past as far more perfect than it truly was, which is controversial because it can impact negative views about the present and negative biases towards many aspects of current life. For example, many Americans believe that life in the 1950s was the height of American society and culture. However, those who looked at the 50s remember as being fraught with racial issues and with threats of nuclear war. 80s movies, sequels, and reboots have become a major prompter of this nostalgia and false nostalgia, and for this reason, researcher Julia Torino has called it Goonies inflicted nostalgia because many nostalgic 80s movies, like the Goonies, are creating these feelings of nostalgia, whether or not the viewers lived through the 80s or if they're just seeing it through the films. So there are some clear benefits of nostalgia, whether or not it is false or nostalgia from real memories. Number one, nostalgia fulfills the three pillars of basic psychological need. And according to this psychological theory, any context will only contribute to happiness or well-being if it satisfies one or more of these pillars. Now, the first pillar is autonomy, which is control over one's actions. The second competence is the skill or ability of a person. And the third pillar is relatedness, which is having close emotional relations with other people. Nostalgic memories often involve memories that were shared with our close friends and family, and they often involve either a situation where we had authority, where we were happy with the results of the situation, or where we were able to apply our skills and abilities to that situation. And according to this theory, this can increase overall well-being in life. The second is also greater happiness. So in a study conducted by various researchers, it's called the Event Reflection Task Study, where an experimental group was asked to write about a nostalgic event, and a control group was asked to write about an ordinary event. And this procedure was repeated twice. And on both occasions, the experimental group reported much higher positive emotions in their writings than the control group, showing that nostalgia and feeling nostalgia over memories can increase happiness and better mental health. And nostalgia has also been shown to decrease loneliness and boredom. The third point is rosy retrospection, which is basically a great contributor to false nostalgia, and this is seeing the past in a more positive or a more rosy light than it really was. Even though this may be controversial, rosy retrospection can actually increase self-esteem and overall well-being through improving our view of our own past, which can then influence how we feel more positive about our present and our future. So here's a case study in Stranger Things, which is a great example of a modern 1980s period science fiction show that has been contributing to false nostalgia, but actually improves viewer experience. So some things that Stranger Things utilizes. It utilizes the aesthetics of nostalgic 80s films such as E.T., The Goonies, and Back to the Future, and it uses common imagery to allude to these films and call back to happy childhood memories. It also utilizes the true problems of the 1980s decade, for example, the Cold War, as an important part of its plotline. In Stranger Things, the Soviets are an important part of the plotline, such as the character Grigori, and they serve as the quintessential bad guys. And even though this may be controversial because it does not depict the reality of the Cold War, it actually adds to the sense of adventure within the show, which increases the popularity of the plot and also can improve the feelings of like childhood adventure nostalgia within the show. This is a healthier form of escapism, particularly because when watching Stranger Things, viewers can reminisce about their happy childhoods, and as seen on a previous slide, this can then increase feelings of happiness and self-esteem in the present. So what are some good solutions that can, well, first of all, these productions are clearly not documentaries, and so they should not be held to such high standards of realism as a documentary would. However, as we can see that false nostalgia has been causing some controversy, there should be some solutions. So number one, a disclaimer should be added to all falsely nostalgic productions, alerting audiences that in these productions, the past may be shown in a different, more positive or worse light as it truly happened. And obviously this would not apply to obviously fantastical elements. For example, there would be no disclaimer for the ghosts in Ghostbusters, of course. And the second point would be the production and distribution of documentaries by popular movie production companies like Disney and Universal. Because these are already popular companies, these would reach a wider audience. And these documentaries should be thematically appealing, so they should be interesting, and they should be accessible to all, with the exception of course, more mature themes, which would be reserved for older audiences. And this would help people to understand what really happened in the past and also educate them on the truths of the past in an interesting and film-like way. The third, and arguably the most important part of the solution, is education. So according to a Gallup poll in 2020, 54% of US adults were unable to read past the 6th grade level. This is concerning because so much of true historical data is shared in print form, and if 54% of the US adult population cannot comprehend this data, it leaves them more susceptible to believing that false nostalgia is truly what happened in the past. And also, 34% of current US school children finish the last school year behind grade level, which is basically suggesting that not only is the education system, not only was it broken years ago when those adults were in school, but it is still currently broken. In order to solve these issues, we must work together with education, both inside and outside of schools, and also with adults, to ensure that all people are educated on what truly happened in the past. In this way, the positive effects of nostalgia can still be affecting people in a good way, and people will still be able to enjoy the movies they love, while also knowing what truly happened in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayana. I have two questions for you. Could you speak to what you found to be the biggest challenge in doing this project?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for me was actually finding reputable sources about this phenomenon, because even though this is such a well-known phenomenon, like, I think a lot of people know and understand that we often feel nostalgia from these movies, there aren't many like credible research-based sources on the measured effects of these movies. So it was definitely a challenge to find sources that pertain to this topic that were from like credible research-based sources.
Now that you know so much more about the role of nostalgia and storytelling and life and history and all understanding, how will this influence your views going forward?
Like my views of movies, or just?
Or your views on life, or
Oh.
how you perceive life?
I think I'm definitely now aware that a lot of the ways of the past was depicted in films, especially in 80s movies, because a lot of 80s movies, they tend to show this like really idyllic, like, for example, in Ferris Bueller, there's like, he like goes out in a Ferrari and he has fun with his friends, and it seems like, oh, it's a great time. But in reality, the 80s were filled with issues, like the Cold War, for example. And I think it'll just let me know that while I can enjoy what I'm watching, and I think I can feel the positive effects of maybe false nostalgia for me because I didn't live through the 80s, I should still be aware of what truly happened. And I think that this is something I would want to share to other people as well, who maybe don't know as much about the 80s decade and who might think that it's truly as good as it was depicted in those films.
Thank you very much. I would say, don't talk about